We went through the Antler program here in Singapore. I mean, people have their opinions about that program, whether they've been on it or not. I'm asked a lot about that. People say, "Oh, you've been on it. Tell me all about it."
And sometimes you have to kind of step back and stop wanting to have scale in everything and do things that don't scale, right? Like
a very sort of smart investor friend of mine recently sort of put out something saying, when you say, "Oh, we're going to launch a startup and we're targeting Southeast Asia," it's like, what are you talking about?
You're watching Next Big Wave, the podcast for founders by founders in Southeast Asia. In this episode, we're going to talk about founder journeys, growth strategies, and much more. Just to help me out, if you could like and subscribe, it would be awesome. And let's get into the episode.
All right. On today's episode of Next Big Wave, I'm joined by Gregor Vand. Gregor is a Scottish founder who then moved around all over the place in the US and then made his way to Asia. Gregor, it's great to have you on the show. Can you give us a little background about yourself?
Yeah, of course. Hi, I'm Gregor Vand. Currently CEO, co-founder of a company called MailPass. In terms of who I am, grew up in Scotland, as you mentioned, Tim. I moved to the US straight after university. People are a bit disappointed. The accent has kind of dropped off over the years. I then moved to Hong Kong and also spent a lot of time in Norway because my other half is actually Norwegian. So know the Nordics pretty well these days as well. We sort of resettled in Hong Kong for then a long time, and then moved over here to Singapore about 2 years ago, and really like it over here, and think the Southeast Asian startup scene is pretty great. So
yeah, well, I tend to agree on that front for sure. Curious, so your background has been sort of an engineer, you're on the technical side. I don't often get technical co-founders or founders on the show, so I'm super excited to kind of dig into some of the technicals of the local landscape, but also talk shop in that sense with you. You're now in the cybersecurity space. That's not a space that I get in front of a lot, and I'm sure you'll have a lot to talk about there. But first of all, can we kind of talk about why you decided to move to Southeast Asia overall, and then you went to Hong Kong, then Singapore. What happened there?
Yeah, no, that's a great. I get that question all the time. So the company I spent the most time building was a company that we were a software engineering shop, if you like, and we built a lot of sort of back-end, I would say, logistic and e-commerce systems. We did a lot with Shopify, but we were kind of building apps that custom apps for large companies, Fortune 500s, that sort of plugged into Shopify and did things that they really needed it to do. And so I started that with my then co-founder out of New York. He was in London, and so I'd been in New York. By the time sort of I was coming to thinking about leaving New York, I'd been there 3 years, and I think this is something people don't talk about. It was partly visa related. I was like, well, I need to renew my visa for the US, and that's a sort of big decision when you're like, is it worth it? I had a great time. I mean, I love New York. It's still top 2 city probably for me. But I just felt I'd kind of done it. And I really had this want to go to Hong Kong, if I'm being honest. I'd spent time there, and I spent actually a lot of time in Shanghai as well. This is back in 2011. But I was kind of keen on Singapore even at that time as well. So actually what I did was, leaving New York, and I basically came to Hong Kong and came here to Singapore as well. And I checked them both out. And I think at that stage in life, Hong Kong, just within 24 hours, I was like, yeah, this is the one, And so I think in terms of the, from the business side, we had a pretty good setup in New York, and we had people that could deal with the client side of things there. And so for me, it was sort of, I probably overestimated the business that we would get in Hong Kong, or sort of in the surrounding area. But then I also underestimated just how powerful the US market would still be for us. And so it was more of a sort of, if I'm being honest, lifestyle choice at that stage, where really wanted to live in Hong Kong, thought the business could still operate quite easily. We were a fully remote business even back then. So that was 2012. We founded that business. So, we were literally one of the first companies to use Slack, like, ever. So,
Really?
yeah. So which is kind of fun. And so, we that was just how we built our business. We looked to people like, back then they were called 37 Signals, and they're Basecamp these days. They were like who really inspired us, like, oh, well, this is possible. It's all remote, and why not? And so that's what we did. And we played around with time zones of who we could hire and that kind of thing. Ultimately, US just didn't work for us. Like, we just had like, from a developer's perspective, we just had too many issues trying to coordinate, like, UK, Europe, Asia, US for our whole team. We were still a fairly small team, around 10 people. So then I actually ended up building more of the team across some of Asia. But the funny thing was, we had sort of, for example, a British person living in South Korea, or someone from the Philippines living in Tokyo. So we were one of these companies that was hard to find back in the day, which was you could actually work remotely. And then during sort of the pandemic, e-commerce on a tear, and I'd already been thinking sort of, I think I'm kind of done with e-commerce, or like logistics and e-commerce. It was really fun to kind of, we built our company alongside one Fortune 500 specifically. They were a huge beer company, the world's largest, so I don't need to name the name probably. And that was a great journey with them. But kind of as we started to come into pandemic, I was just thinking, I think it's time to sort of maybe move on. And my co-founder, I could tell, was pretty happy to keep going with the business. So yeah, we did an internal buyout that worked out really well. And then I think, around that time was also when Hong Kong was just starting to have a few issues, especially pandemic wise, like not handling it quite the way a lot of us would have hoped they could have. And through a few different ways, I managed to meet an investor actually in the company Black Panda. So that's basically Asia's only, I understand, cybersecurity and cyber insurance company. So they were at that stage, they were seed stage, and they were like looking towards Series A. And they sort of really needed someone who could kind of take the technology from somewhere to somewhere, and that ended up being me. So that was why I moved to Singapore. So Black Panda does have a very large presence in Hong Kong, but ultimately the HQ, if you like, is in Singapore. And so that's what happened. They sort of said, look, we get that you're not super happy in Hong Kong. Would you want to come try Singapore? We did, and really, really liked it. Again, I think life stage is one of these things to think about. I always get asked the question, oh, so how is Singapore compared to Hong Kong? And it's just about who you are and what life stage you're in, and you got to think, what is it that you want now? And for example, more space was one thing that we were quite keen to have. Hong Kong, you'll pay an exorbitant amount for a very small space. So here in Singapore we get more space and more greenery, generally speaking. And so yeah, and then so was at Black Panda for 2 years. Got them through Series A, and I believe that they've actually just announced a A2. But a year ago, again, I just got itchy feet from the founder perspective. I was not a founding team member at Black Panda. I was a CTO, and the rest of my whole life has been being a founder. so it was very difficult to kind of turn that off, I guess. And so so then founded what I'm doing now, MailPass, here in Singapore. Was aware that, especially through Black Panda, had come to realize that Singapore is such a base for cybersecurity in Southeast Asia and Asia generally. So it has just been a great place to kind of set up shop again, which is fun. So.
Yeah, good stuff. So there's a lot to unpack there, and I have a few follow-up questions. But before we get into that, maybe tell us what MailPass is, and it's cybersecurity, obviously, but like, why does it differ from Black Panda, for example?
Yeah, sure. So Black Panda is an incident response, ultimately incident response and cyber insurance. So what does that mean? That means if you get hacked, that's the company you would hope to come and help you out of the problem. From all the angles, is it you need the technical help to literally get your systems back online, or, you need reputational help or legal help, even things like ransomware. I didn't even realize it until I joined Black Panda. There's such things as ransomware negotiators, and they genuinely can find ways to work with who might be trying to extort money from you and get that amount down. They know these are the tactics to get through that. And I was working on sort of automating a lot of the response side and the cyber insurance side, like how to actually set up a policy and lodge claims like in a more automated fashion, which in insurance, as again I learned, was so behind the times. So let's call that maybe slightly more reactive, in the sense that that's a lot of after something happens. We did work on there's a product that I set up and worked on there, which is attack surface management, and what that means is, people don't maybe realize, but if someone's looking to kind of attack you, they can do a lot of things to really understand your whole system footprint before they kind of launch into whatever they want to do. And so what we were doing at Black Panda, as well as a couple of other great companies out here are doing, is kind of mimicking that and saying, look, we're going to show you as a company what that might look like, so that you can prepare, and we can help you also understand, I say, what that attack surface looks like. So that's a little bit proactive, but I would say, largely speaking, it was more on the reactive side. How to set things up so that because often we kind of used to say it's when, not if, because it is true. When you get attacked, what are you going to do about it? With MailPass is, well, A is very specific. It's email, but then people kind of say, oh, email, is that kind of old? What's going on there? What we're just pointing out to people is email's actually evolved big time in terms of its importance, especially around authentication. And if you think about all the kind of magic links that you get sent to like log into services or one-time codes. So the way the world is moving is passwordless. Passwords are finally being recognized to be moved away. So we have a couple of things. We're a passkey only platform, i.e. we don't issue passwords to our users. They can only use what's called a passkey. That means, I would say in sort of super broad brush, it's like, imagine you can only touch ID or face ID into a platform. That's what we provide. And then kind of one of our main products, we kind of have two products, but I'll maybe just speak to the main product. The main product is if you need absolute surety about who has sent you an email message, we can do that. So we call it attestation of email messages, effectively. So if someone, and again, maybe in the startup world, we're like, oh, but we use Slack or something like, sure. But a lot of companies out there, email is still the predominant communication method. And it's used for these really important things, like literally talking about sensitive contracts, or especially in the legal sphere, with clients. And if someone believes that it was actually the person, but it's not, the consequences are huge. So we basically help companies both internally but also externally attest their messages. So if I'm sending something to whether staff members or an outside client, I'm all basically just to describe in broad brush the platform. I send the message, but then I'm prompted to touch my Touch ID, and I do that. And what ends up happening is the recipient gets a sort of additional message saying, Gregor was in Singapore today, and he literally pressed this Touch ID to authenticate this message. So you've got no worries about who that is. That's the kind of core product. There's a few bits off that, but I think that's probably the main thing to sort of help explain what we do.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, it's fairly technical, and I've been loving passkeys ever since I discovered them. So I totally see a future there. Yeah. I'm assuming it's the same thing, because like whenever I log into my financial institutions, it asks me for a passkey, and then I have to secure it or like open it with my Face ID on my phone, like separately, kind of like a 2FA with Face ID. So I really see the future in that, and I've been hacked countless times with my passwords, SIM cloned and all that stuff. So I'm quite familiar with the threats. So yeah, pretty cool project. One thing I picked up on earlier, you mentioned kind of your journey, but you said you've always been a founder. And I could see through your LinkedIn that that's mainly true, right? You were a director of finance early on in your career in New York, but ever since then, you've been CTO, co-founder, etc. How did that happen? Like a lot of people sort of fall into being a co-founder or build up experience and then decide they want to go on their own because they found something they want to spin off from their existing business. Like, how did you fall into being a founder?
If you're watching this and you're a B2B startup founder in Southeast Asia, struggling to grow your startup, we have a whole community of founders just like you. And on a weekly basis, we discuss strategies and growth hacks. We'd love to have you amongst us. Feel free to join at nextbigwave.co or find the link in the description. I'll see you there.
Yeah. So it's funny. Yeah, I realized on my LinkedIn, yeah, director of finance. I can talk about that because it was sort of true, sort of not true, if I'm being honest. So how did I start being a founder? So at university, okay, well, actually, I might as well go, because I think this is kind of interesting, again, yeah, to people thinking about being a founder or yeah. I went to one university and I didn't really enjoy it. So quite quickly, I quit that. And in the interim, I had about, I think, 6 months between where I started going and where I ended up going for a very happy 4 years. And in that time, I've just always been someone who loves, I've loved coding since I was 12. So I always loved coding something. So it's just like code something. But I think the difference with me maybe to other, programmers was I still really liked sort of the outside world and especially in like the creative world. I was just really into that. I'm musical through drumming. I can't play any other instrument to save myself, but drumming has been a huge part of my life, like kit drumming and other kinds of drumming. And I've always loved designing things. So I ended up starting back then, that was 2007, a t-shirt brand, of course you do. So, but again, back then, it wasn't, we're so used to direct to consumer now, etc. Back then, literally having to figure out how do you start something like this, and started a little brand. I had links in the music community, so I got like quite good bands used to come to Edinburgh, where I grew up. It was quite a sort of hub for that kind of thing. Bands would wear the stuff. I was able to set up like an online store super easy back then because I could code. And then I kind of just like progressed it a bit. I got a really good, so I started going to university in Edinburgh, and then I had a chance to go to Shanghai. So it was back in 2008. So back then, the Shanghai government was literally paying people to go to Shanghai and meet factories. They paid for the flights, 5-star hotel, meet the factories. So that's what I did. That was my first time to Asia, I think. It was, people was like, are you serious, Greg? This is a scam, the Chinese government flying you to Shanghai.
Luring you into the country.
Right, yeah. And I was like, yeah, this seems a bit weird, but they've all you need to do is buy the plane ticket, and then they've given us the whole schedule of what will happen when I arrive, and then the reimbursement process, and I was like, great. So that's what I did. I went out and did line up a factory from that visit. I wouldn't say it was the best factory in the world, and I learned a lot from that that experience, that contract. And then fast forward a little bit, I met my ultimate co-founder of that business, still within t-shirts and fashion. Ultimately, I was really wanting to go back to kind of the coding side of things, and he was able to really lead more of the creative and the sort of artistic side. He was quite a well-known person in the fashion industry, generally. So he came in on that business, and again, get to the end of my university career and moved to New York because that's where he lived, and that's kind of how we had structured the business, that I would then move out there. And then, yeah, I would say like after a year, I was just, I can think back, I would be getting on the bus in New York and like reading TechCrunch on my iPhone, which was pretty novel back then. Like I was pretty lucky to have one, to be honest. And just thinking, I just need to be doing software. Like this whole like clothing thing is just not, I hate handling the inventory, and back then you still kind of had to do seasons, and it was all very Scandinavian focused. Like I really liked the aesthetic and what we were doing, but I just couldn't kind of get my head in the business anymore. So had sort of a pretty amicable parting with my co-founder in New York, and then basically had a visa that I could just keep and use for the next couple of years to try and do something. So phoned up a friend in London. I was aware we had coded before, kind of on little projects, and he was like, yeah, let's do it. Like, let's just start coding and see what happens. And yeah, it was one of these. So I think I'm going to pause here, just kind of to your question of like, why being a founder? This is the point. I've just never liked the idea of working for someone. It's just like, I think that's maybe what's hard to help people with sometimes, is they sort of say, oh, how can you kind of decide to like, leave the job and that thing. I say unfortunately, but fortunately, I just never had that chance. I was just always, I wasn't that worried, like, I say worried about money, but I mean, I wasn't bothered about money. It was just like, so long as my expenses are being covered, I was pretty happy. And obviously, as you get older in life, that mentality has to change a little bit. But I think that was it. It was just, I was just doing what felt right to me. That's the easiest way to describe it. And then built up. So the company was called Pixel Cabin. We ended up being a major. We were one of the first 10. So Shopify at some point opened up what's called Shopify Plus, which was their enterprise tier. We were asked to be one of the first 10 official Shopify Plus sort of providers, effectively. And that was because we'd done a lot with, they're called, AB InBev, large beer conglomerate. We did early on with them. So they had opened this venture arm called ZX Ventures. And again, we were just like, oh, this is cool. We're doing this little project for ZX Ventures. And then suddenly that was turned into, hey guys, we want to acqui-hire you, basically. What, like, name us your number kind of thing. And we were like, what? This is okay. And but we talked about it, and we were literally just the two of us back then, and we're like, yeah, we didn't really kind of get into this to just now go work for like a big company. So we said no, and we said, but can we be your like full-time contract partner for this? And they said yes, and that was amazing. We had some amazing people that we worked with there. Still in contact with quite a few of them today. It was just a time, I think, back then, there was this big B2C push, and we were just in the right place, and so we built that business up really with them, getting the contract we got with them that enabled us to hire a lot more people, for me to be a bit more flexible and to, move to Hong Kong and not worry too much about, do I need to be in New York, and that kind of thing. And then, so then joining Black Panda was interesting, because it was really, I've helped a couple of other companies, as you can see in my LinkedIn, being sort of stand-in CTO, and that was me dipping my toes in the water a bit, going, oh, maybe I would enjoy helping another company on their journey, not just being a founder and so on, because I think
being on payroll, that I've been the temptation, being like, hey, I'm on payroll, I'm doing what I'm asked, and then I can take vacations. Like, sometimes there's an appeal to that, right? Having been a founder 3 times, I'm always wondering, like, how does it feel to be able to completely disconnect for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, still be paid? Like, I've always been curious about that. So maybe that's the idea as well for you, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was kind of like, I'm not someone who can stand still. Being on a sort of, I know this is very like not a real thing anyway, but if someone says, oh, I'm going to make X amount of money and then go to a beach. I mean, sure. But I mean, there are people who genuinely can, I've met them in Singapore, literally, who have made a lot of money, let's just say through, I don't know, Tesla stock, and they sit at home all day doing absolutely nothing. And I just, my brain doesn't work that way. Like, I'm very aware very quickly I will not be a happy person if I'm just kind of like, waking up each morning going, shall I read a book or shall I sit in a cafe? That is not me. So it was kind of like, okay, do I have to start something new, or can I actually, as you say, go and work inside a business, help a business where, sure, the sort of the downside is protected a bit, but it was less about that. It was more about what you said. I can actually just go in at 9, come out at 6, and not massively worry or have to overthink the outside parts, like, because I totally support that's what an employee should be able to do. but consequently, conversely, a founder, I've met founders who think that that's being a founder. Oh well, 5 now, I'm off home. And it's like, yeah, that's exactly what being a founder is.
Maybe
not.
lifestyle founders.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that was it. Like, did that, and Black Panda was a huge opportunity. It was like it's a super interesting company, making big waves here in Southeast Asia. It was just an opportunity that genuinely I couldn't like refuse. It was a sort of getting to really come into the cybersecurity world and work with some really interesting people. A lot are like ex-military, ex-police force around the world. Going off to the US and meeting a ton of amazing people. The founder of Black Panda, he's like got so many connections in different areas of cybersecurity. Like very fast, you're in the room with the CEO of X or CTO of Y. Amazing experience. So just couldn't kind of pass it up. But after 2 years, I did feel I'd kind of done what my remit was just to get them from kind of A to B, or C to A, if you like. And I just know myself. I was like, I just need to start something again. I've got the energy back, And
how long did you take a break for before that happened?
So I think I would say I took more of a break before Black Panda, actually. So yeah.
Okay.
So after Pixel Cabin, I kind of earmarked about 6 months. I was like, yeah, this feels right. The sidebar to that is I did actually have a little startup in the middle there, which was a data startup with a good friend of mine, and that was super fun. But I went into that sort of very eyes wide open. I said, look, hey, I don't want to be a majority shareholder. I'm coming in to be CTO. I'm here to build stuff. So that's the deal. Like I'm not here to kind of be the standard CEO,
Right.
or and that was the deal, and that was totally accepted. But equally, that was maybe part of the reason it just didn't work out so well, because that person also had they're a very successful founder in their own right. And I think maybe over time it was sort of clear, actually, one of us would need to step into a full-time sort of CEO role. And I said, yeah, that's not what I came here to do. But for me, that was a break, though. It was 6 months of coding and working on something just totally different, just get to code all day. Amazing. And yeah, it's kind of, as that was sort of, obviously winding up, as well as Hong Kong starting to look a bit sort of shaky to us. And this is where I love life. I happened to meet one of the investors of Black Panda at a barbecue on one of the remote islands off Hong Kong. And you think during COVID, this person might very unlikely have been there had it not been for COVID, because everyone's stuck inside Hong Kong. So I just happened to talk to someone, and they said, hey, what do you do? And I said, well, nothing actually. Like, yeah, but what do you do? And I was like, well, I'm deliberately doing nothing right now, but like, this is kind of who I am and what I do. And then very quickly they said, well, have you thought about like cybersecurity? Because it sounds like if you put all these bits together, that's kind of what they need. So I talked to them probably back in March 21, and by the end of 21, we reconnected. Sort of, it was a good time for both of us to sort of kick that off, so back to your question, it was about 6 months, and I think that was good, and I learned a lot during that period of what should a break be, and it shouldn't just be nothing. You need to,
For sure.
you need to fill that with productive things for you. Yeah.
Yeah. I also told myself 6 months after the last exit. I lasted about 2 weeks, and then I started this podcast, started writing on LinkedIn, started coaching startups. So I completely get it. But, just like you, I kind of wanted to figure out what my next big move would be. And instead of doing nothing, might as well do productive stuff, meet, network with people, create content, build an audience and a brand and stuff like that. So completely agree, and we'll see what the future holds. One thing that you mentioned it in passing, but to me, the big topic is like, you said you moved to Hong Kong, and then Singapore felt a lot cheaper, a lot more spacious, Those are kind of like the developed, quote unquote, hubs in Southeast Asia. Some people choose to move exclusively to those. Others, for them, Southeast Asia is the rest. It's like Bangkok, Manila, Kuala Lumpur. Now, have you considered those? And because, for me, someone who lives in Bangkok, you saying Singapore is cheap sounds outrageous, because everyone I talk to in Singapore is like, wow, Bangkok is actually cheap. We're getting crazy big apartments, great lifestyle. So have you considered anything else in Southeast Asia, or, there's really these two groups of people and you just categorize under the Singapore, Hong Kong group?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So I think like, this is where I'm quite specific in that, people could believe that I sort of moved to New York with a small company. When I did, oh, how on earth can you afford that? You can afford it if you want to, And I think I've always been someone who's very, just to be honest, smart with how I spend money. And I also look at Singapore and Hong Kong. I look at it in value terms. What do you get for paying the prices that you? Yeah, yes, you're paying more for your lunch and your rent and your etc. In all these cities. But I am someone who really likes a city that just works and is kind of feels to me like the sort of the hub of especially the business action, I guess. I think that's where maybe sometimes I've gone a little bit over on the business side and forgot about where the engineering is kind of sitting. And Hong Kong used to be fantastic, and unfortunately just has fallen away in that sense. And Singapore has gained a lot, I would say, from that. So to the other cities, it's not like in the past I would have discounted them. And I'm really interested in KL, I must say. Like I'm going to be spending a bit more time there later this year. I've been on a few trips since living here, mainly for work. So it is a city that sort of interests me. I don't, just personally, the rest of Southeast Asia, it hasn't sort of quite got me yet. And I would say that's because as people point out that have lived in the region, Southeast Asia is every country is just so different. It's not. Yeah, and I a very sort of smart investor friend of mine recently sort of put out something saying, when you say, oh, we're going to launch a startup and we're targeting Southeast Asia, it's like, what are you talking about? You have to like tailor the product and everything, and a product for Indonesia should look probably completely different if it's from Malaysia or etc. So I think, again, I've always tried to focus on businesses and products that kind of you can grow out of somewhere like Hong Kong and Singapore, but ultimately I've always been a little bit more interested to sort of use these as basis to push out to places like US, maybe Europe. Japan still fascinates me. I'd love to live there and do something more work-wise there. But again, you got to balance that with just don't speak the language. The culture is completely, business culture is incredibly different. So yeah, I think I still would, I know everyone's got a different situation, but I think it's really good to sort of consider taking a bit of financial pain, even if that's what it is, to be in these cities for longer than you expect, rather than sort of assume, oh, well, it's expensive, so I should go live in the cheap place. That's just how I think, but I know everyone has their own situation to think about.
For sure. I mean, there's definitely going to be a case-by-case thing there. I agree with all the points you made. I think it's a matter of lifestyle. It's a matter of what you want to achieve at this point in life, who you want to meet, etc. So it makes perfect sense. Earlier, you mentioned that you met one of Black Panda's investors on an island off Hong Kong. Right now on your LinkedIn, I see that MailPass is backed by Antler. So what's your fundraising situation for MailPass exactly?
Yeah, so yeah, I went through we went through the Antler program here in Singapore. I mean, people have their opinions about that program, whether they've been on it or not. I'm asked a lot about that. People say, oh, you've been on it. Tell me all about it. And again, it is, you got to make the call for yourself on why you want to join something like that. Look at the terms, decide, do the terms make sense to you? Decide, do the opportunities make sense to you? And, for example, with Antler, the way I described it to other people, even at the time, and myself, was I would much rather have an Antler for a slightly higher equity stake whose sole business is helping you find more investors and growing that business, which is different to angel investors. Because yes, you might get some angels who, the way, however you know them, etc., they're really there to help you, put in their time or so forth. But the majority, I would say, from, let's just say the amount that you get from Antler, I assume most people would probably take, I don't know, maybe 4 to 5 angels to kind of piece together. And you don't have one single person who's like really fighting your corner is the way I look at it. Equally, coming to Southeast Asia, because Hong Kong doesn't really sit inside that. I didn't really have a network here. I didn't have a network of investors. I didn't have a network much beyond sort of who I'd met through Black Panda. So it was a really great way to just meet other great founders. And we still work out of the Antler office today. And that's key. I mean, even just today, I was just introduced to this amazing AI security startup who've come in from China, and they're setting up base here in Singapore. And I was literally leaving the office, and someone Antler said, "Hey, Gregor, you need to talk to these guys," and we talked for 20 minutes. And I think just having that community, it's really hard to put a price on that. And then we have raised angel money after that. A very kind angel in our network really liked what we were doing and has really helped us top that up. So we're still, of course, looking to raise a full round, but we're feeling pretty good right now in terms of where we are as a product relative to our runway and all that kind of thing. So,
Is cybersecurity hot right now with VC money? Not familiar with it at all. No? Oh no?
No.
Tell me why. Curious.
Well, all I would say is it's hot if you as usual, if you can chuck the word AI in there, and
right.
And yeah, but I would say the cyber security. I mean, I still hate the word cyber. I mean, I think most of us do in the industry. We try and come up with any other name, but unfortunately, it's just what people do understand.
Digital security, maybe.
Exactly, digital security, and they're like, "Do you mean cyber?" Yeah, we mean cyber. So, there was definitely a wave. I would say 5 years ago. So many companies sprouting up back then talking about AI because it is. When we talk about AI today, we were pretty much talking about LLMs. AI has been around for a while, so it's good to put that distinction in. But yeah, I think it was very interesting. We met a few VCs. I mean, we've now met a lot of VCs here in Singapore, and those that have invested in cyber or were very close to, they're nervous because they have seen. I wouldn't say sort of getting burned by, well, the company just kind of didn't perform. They're actually like concerned about the security of the security company. If you're a platform saying, "Oh, we'll protect XYZ of your assets," and then that company itself has a problem, investors hate that.
It's bad PR.
Yeah, you have to find investors that they themselves have been in cybersecurity and really get it. Like, yes, these things happen, and that's why we're here. We're here to put money into things that can hopefully prevent it. But there will always be cyber attacks. That's why there's money in cyber. So, it has been a bit of a tough one, sort of explaining why cyber should still be taken seriously and on the VC circuit. But we still see people getting funded. A great company here in Singapore, Watchtower. Benjamin Harris, founder. Just amazing to see what they're doing, and it just proves that if you there are still pockets, niches. If you can really apply some novel technology into an area and prove that it's real and prove that you're doing something, people will back you. Admittedly, it's all public information. I believe Watchtower's main funding has come from the US. So again, I'll be honest, I think that's probably where we're going to have to end up looking if we're thinking about, real funds. I think we're going to have to go and put our flying boots on and head over to US and do the rounds there. Just I think the sentiment there of investing in cyber is just a very different story to hear.
Fair enough. And kind of to wrap things up, I want to talk about growth, because every startup goes about it very differently. And for you, it's such a niche sort of product and service offering that you have. How did you go about, finding your first clients, and what is your idea of scaling this type of product? Your ICP basically is very narrow, right? So how do you go about that?
Yeah, so exactly. I mean, I would say our ICP started broader than it should have, but I'm really happy where we've got to on that, which is the legal industry is our sort of, I say current ICP. I don't mean that's going to change tomorrow. I just mean we're aware that we'll be targeting and are targeting law firms and anyone like legal counsel inside other companies, and we do think there's a really strong case for that. And then once that's kind of on its way, we know we can branch out from there. And yeah, I think that's probably just something I've learned more over the last even couple of months. Is a lot of what Antler does want you to think about is like ICP. And I would go in pitching and saying, oh, anyone who uses email, and of course they say, no, Gregor, come on, like find your TAM, find your ICP, and but I think you have to really live it. You have to like really go through it. You have to talk to so many people, and then start to pull the threads of interesting. Right, we've talked to a few lawyers, and they're saying this, and that really resonates with what we're doing. So we should maybe actually follow that path a bit more. Because, like I think a lot of companies have, initially you talk to people, and anyone who seems interested, you're willing to entertain and try and get them on a pilot and this kind of thing. And for sure, we saw that early on. There was a couple of companies that were really interested, and it was just clear, like, we did not want to serve them at the end of the day, because we realized the reasons you want our product is not what we want to sell. They found this sort of bit of the product that sort of made sense to them, but we're like, that's not why we're selling you this product. We're selling you this other thing, and you're kind of using it for this other weird purpose. And I know that some people might say, well, sure, but maybe that's the
Run
threat.
with it. Yeah.
Yeah. And we said, no. There's no way that that's the product, because like that kind of exists elsewhere, basically. So I think that's where you got to be super. That's why I think funding, when you think about taking on VC funding, like, why are you doing it? Like, it enables you to have that space to say, look, this is going somewhere, but we don't need to take on that customer just because it's a paying customer. You're going to really, really clear. If we have 10 of those, is that going to work? If we have 100 of those, is that going to work? Like, and I think that's something I've really learned hard over the last couple of months, is like, it's okay to like say no to someone on the basis that you're really confident. I mean, you got to have some kind of confidence, and there's a risk there, but have some confidence that if you can get more like 10 of your ICP, like, stop chasing the two that are not your ICP, but like waving the money at you right now, is, I guess, how I'm looking at it. Yeah.
And so how do you get in front of these law firms? Because I mean, again, they have to find out about what you're offering. They have to trust you enough to buy into it. So what's your strategy around that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm quite lucky. I actually did like a joint degree that involved law, and I have a lot of lawyer friends. So that helps, and you should never discount, like, actually, where do your connections lie? Like, mine lie in technology and seems like law. So that's very interesting, like, where I can literally ping a whole bunch of, especially life stage, a lot of my connections are now becoming partners. Great. So, like, if you're 10 years younger than me, all your friends are associates. But if your friends are now all partners, that helps. So I'm able to actually literally just direct message, LinkedIn, etc., and say, hey, it's not like, oh, hey, you owe me something. It's like, hey, talk to me. Would you be okay, like, talking to me about email security? And they all actually say yes. There's something about, so just saying, look, can you just talk to me about this? And then, and even during that conversation, we're not trying to sell MailPass. I'm literally just listening. I'm just listening. What are your pain points? What are your problems? We, as a company, we are very rigorous with our notes from any chats we have. Anyone who has one has to document it, bullet point, top to bottom. It goes in the chats, and we dissect it, and we all go like, right, okay, what are we pulling from this, and what position were they, and why? So we're in that stage. And then a funny story from the other week. I actually went to there's a company, Workato, so they're like a AI, of course, automation platform. and they threw this great big conference, and it was really nice. And thank you for inviting me, Workato. Had a good time, but next door was Tech Law Fest, and I had no idea it was on. And I just kind of walked up to the desk and said, like, "Hey, can I get like a pass like now?" And they were like, "Yeah, sure." so went into this conference, and our ICPs are everywhere. It's great. So I just started talking to all of them, and so you got to do things like that. Like, don't be afraid to just be like, well, I think like this is fun. Workato, big thing, but I think all my customers are actually in this next door room that's like smaller, but can I get in there? And obviously I maybe should have known about Tech Law Fest, but you can't know about everything. So yeah, you just got to, just be creative and think about, I wouldn't, I think I've heard, I've seen some of your episodes, and at the end of the day, things like, cold calling, cold emailing, it's a tough thing these days. You got to be way more creative and think about how can you kind of fast track in to talk to someone who might be interested. Yeah.
And sometimes you have to kind of step back and stop wanting to have scale in everything and do things that don't scale, right? Like
exactly
these events, like all of a sudden you're in front, like face to face with even 10 of your ICPs. That's going to have way more impact than some sort of CD outbound email campaign. So
exactly.
I love doing things that don't scale. Like even these types of podcasts, I used to run an industry podcast for my previous fintech, right? And I'd have a one-on-one conversation for 30 minutes with my ICP talking about something completely irrelevant to the business. But because of these relationships, some people would ask me what I do, be able to talk about it, lead to a further conversation, or they introduce me to someone that might be interested. So just even networking is super powerful to me.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's just never believe that who you're like, obviously some people you sort of might talk to and think like there's virtually no way this is going to sort of lead to anything, but most people, you never know. You just never know. And so
exactly,
you got to obviously balance the time. I code daily, so I can't be out, walking around and on calls all day, but never discount a situation. I feel like just a shout out to Black Panda. I learned that a lot there. Like never discount going into an event or taking a call from someone. You just never know actually what that might lead to. So that's
I have so many stories in that regard, but you just went ahead with shoutouts. Like to end this episode, I'd like to offer you an opportunity to shout out to anyone. So do you want to go ahead?
I mean, look, the team right now, my two co-founders right now, I just think it's a hard journey, and sure, I'm the CEO and CTO, and kind of was the instigator of the project, but man, I would not be here without the two of them. And I just think everyone's got their strengths and weaknesses. I have absolutely mine. So yeah, I just want to, we've been doing a lot lately, and I know it's been a bit of a grind as it is. So thank you co-founders when you probably watch this at some point. So yeah.
So Gregor, it's been a pleasure. That's the pod, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Tim. I really appreciate it.